I feel like it has to have come up before, but just in case it didn't, I love replacement heroes. When I first started reading comics, Ben Reilly was just finding his footing as Spider-Man. War Machine will always look cooler to me than Iron Man. And Danny Ketch, as far as I'm concerned, is the best Ghost Rider, no offense to Johnny Blaze or Robert Reyes. And when I started buying Captain America comics, it was with the death of Steve Rogers, after which his old friend Bucky took up the shield. Bucky immediately connected with me in a way that Steve Rogers never could. Rogers is perfect. He's handsome, he's smart, he's physically powerful despite having no flashy powers. He's motivated to save the world because it's the right thing to do. Not only do I struggle to relate to that, but I've always been an X fan first. And Steve Rogers is often the grumpy authoritarian figure to their awesome group of mutant outlaws. But Bucky Barnes, especially as reimagined by then-author Ed Brubaker, was human. He had been used, manipulated, and forced to serve an agenda not his own for decades. When Steve died, Bucky became Cap not because he was the best choice for the role, or because he was the most patriotic man alive, or even because he was loyal to the idea of America. Bucky took up the shield because he wanted to be a better person. He wanted to make up for his failings, his mistakes, and his blood-stained path. And while I have certainly never spent time as a Soviet-era assassin, that is a character concept that I can connect with. Bucky isn't perfect, and neither am I. Bucky will never live up to the myth of Steve Rogers, and I couldn't either. Fast forward a handful of years, and author Rick Remender ends his volume of Captain America by draining the super soldier serum from Steve, forcing a new hand to take up the shield. This time, though, it was his longtime friend and ally Sam Wilson, the high-flying Falcon, who took up the mantle. Like Bucky, Sam is a character who feels much more human than Steve Rogers does for me. He's flawed, he makes mistakes, he questions his own worthiness, especially when it comes to being Captain America. And unlike Bucky, Sam has no physical enhancements to make his job easier. Sure, he does have wings and he can fly, but his baseline combat strength is that of a normal human, making the job harder for him physically. Sam also has the added challenge of being a black man in America, and that can be as dangerous as facing down a supervillain. As a white guy, I do not claim to have a solid understanding of Sam's feelings, but I can certainly empathize with them. And as the racists came out of the woodwork to complain about Sam as Cap, my sympathies went out to him. There were a lot of people who complained that Sam being chosen was too easy, or it was too telegraphed as part of the story, and that maybe it was unearned, or that Marvel was just looking to get some social justice credit. But Sam has been an ally of Captain America for decades. He has been an active Avenger for years, and he has risked his life dozens, if not hundreds of times in the worlds of the Marvel Universe. Why wouldn't Steve trust him to take up the shield? And the more I read Sam's adventures as Captain America, the more I came to like him and the depth that he brought to the role. Unlike Steve or Bucky, Sam's stories were, to at least some degree, built around the racism of America, the police, and the government. And these are forces that one man cannot stand against and just bring down and rebuild. Sam's time as Captain America actually ended with him putting down the shield. He quit being Captain America. And while from a story perspective I wasn't happy to see Sam step down, I certainly understood why. He was fighting forces that are bigger than a single terroristic madman like the Red Skull, or the manipulative Dr. Faustus, or strangers who had superpowers. He was fighting all of those things, yes, but disguised as legitimate, approved by the public systems. How could a single man not fail when up against an entire country that didn't want him in that role? Bucky became the Winter Soldier again. Sam became the Falcon again. I kept an eye on their adventures over the years. I read the interviews, I read preview pages, but neither man interested me as who they were, unfortunately. They could be the Winter Soldier and the Falcon just fine. They knew how to do those jobs, but they truly struggled as Captain America, and it was that struggle that I found fascinating. So it wasn't until I read 2022's Captain America Iron Man miniseries that I found a reason to look into their own adventures again. My name is Ben, and this is Comic Book Breakdown episode 20, the Falcon and the Winter Soldier miniseries. Our two heroes start their adventures separately, before finally coming together. We see Bucky get attacked at his Indiana home by armed men in combat gear, unmarked, of course. He's definitely challenged by them and their numbers, but come on, he's the Winter Soldier. He was assassinating world leaders when these men were babies. He downs them all easily, scoops up his cat, and hops on his motorcycle in order to escape. Sam, meanwhile, has resumed his life as the Falcon and now runs a veteran support group in his spare time. One of their members, Sally Mackenzie, has gone missing, and Sam's investigation has led him to the OFU, the Office of Federal Utilities. And only saying that out loud does it sound like OFU, and I don't know if that acronym was intentional on author Derek Landy's part or not, but that's one of those things you might want to say out loud before you let the script get final approval. The OFU sounds like they handle water and electrical needs for the government, but what they actually handle are terrorist cells in America. If they really are behind Sally's disappearance, then it doesn't bode well for her. Sam heads to the OFU's New York office, but he finds everyone in the office dead. The only person not dead is Bucky, who is adamant that he did not do this. Sam did ask if he did, but he also believes him when he says he didn't. They exchange notes on what's going on, and Bucky says that if Sally was being investigated by the OFU, then there is at least a chance that she has been taken in by one of the terrorist groups. He would know. As part of his presidential pardon for past activities, Bucky now works for the OFU. He is the guy that they send in order to clean out the cells. He came here after he was attacked, figuring that the attack was payback for his work, but he found only bodies. Except for one. There is a person missing. Bucky's handler, Veronica Eden. He pulls her file, and they leave so that they can ask her some questions. At her place, they discover a badly hungover Veronica. She is less than thrilled to see Bucky at her house. Personal visits like this are a huge breach of protocol, after all. But when they talk about why they're here, she understands the severity of what's going on, and runs off to vomit. After she calms down, they access her work files from her laptop, hoping that the OFU's recent investigations might give them a clue as to what's going on. Veronica reports that they were close to identifying the next head of HYDRA. There are two candidates leading the charge. One of them is a protege of the recently killed Baron Zemo, and the other is a new player. They don't know who yet. But the protege is taking a train out of the city later today. If they can hurry, maybe they can stop them. Before Sam and Bucky can leave, a young man, like 20 or so, blocks their exit. He's dressed in a pullover sweater vest, khakis, and he has beads wrapped around his right wrist. He's blonde, and in interviews, I've seen it mentioned that he's meant to look like a young Robert Redford. And I did not make that connection, but if it helps you, there you go, listener. This kid, and he definitely acts more like a youthful teenager than a 20-year-old man, so I'm probably going to call him kid a couple times in this, makes two things clear really quickly. First, he is a big fan of Captain America, and he is just thrilled to meet Sam and Bucky. I mean, two Captain Americas right here? This is crazy! And he gets to fight them? Oh, let me tell you, what an honor, guys. Because that's the second thing. The Natural is the one who killed the people at the OFU, and now he's going to kill them. He is called the Natural, as in, he is a natural-born killer. The Natural is also a film that Robert Redford starred in, so there's your connection. Again, it's not something that I picked up on, and I guess it's neat, but other than being a weird Easter egg to an Easter egg to the Captain America Civil War movie and Robert Redford's role in that, I'm not exactly sure what this is supposed to do. Bucky is the most condescending of the pair as the fight begins, but the Natural quickly proves himself to be a match for them both. He's dodging their punches, flipping them around, and fanboying the entire time. This finally pisses Bucky off enough that he draws a pistol, preparing to just shoot the kid, but Sam knocks the gun away. They don't just kill people. Even if he did kill at the OFU office, then they're going to arrest him, they bring him into the police, but they don't just kill him, Bucky. During a lull in combat, Bucky asks the Natural why he did it, and the Natural explains that, you see, he gets bored, really easily. When that happens, he doesn't really think through the consequences of his actions, he just kind of does stuff. He killed everyone in the office because he thought that it would be entertaining. And now, as a punishment for going against orders, he has been ordered to kill Sam and Bucky. But he wants to be a good soldier, like Captain America, right? And doesn't a good soldier question orders? Because if an order is a bad order, shouldn't a good soldier disobey it? But he wants to be a part of what HYDRA's got going on so bad. Oh, they got so much cool stuff coming up. So you know what? The Natural says here's what he's going to do. He is going to leave them alive this time, and that will give them a second chance to stop him. And they better stop him, because if they don't, he will kill them. For realsies this time. He takes Veronica and books it. This isn't really pointed out as part of the story, we're given no indication that anything has happened to Veronica at all, but yeah, he takes her. That's established later on in the book. With no idea where the Natural went, Sam and Bucky get back on their original track. They know that Zemo's protege is leaving town on a train. They head to it, they board it in transit. And they discover that it is populated with HYDRA hopefuls. They fight their way through 8 train cars of attempted assassination and make it to the end. There, they discover that the protege isn't a protege at all. It's Baron Zemo himself. This was where I hit my first problem with this miniseries. All of our issues, we'll see by the time this ends, that all of our issues have one big action sequence and a bunch of characters standing around talking and quipping for the rest of the issue. It really does remind me of Disney Plus's recent string of Marvel shows, which also generally have one action sequence in an episode and then a whole lot of talking. That formula works for TV, though, as actors have charisma and charm inherent to being a real human being. They move around the set when they're talking, and they're just visually interesting to watch. But in a comic book, those action sequences are static. And while artist Federico Vincentini has an animated feel to his characters and their sense of movement, his action sequences are nothing special. There's no interesting movement during them, there's no real planning of how Bucky and Sam fight simultaneously, there's honestly nothing interesting happening during these fight sequences for the most part. If you're lucky, you'll get a joke or two, and honestly, I don't find the humor in this very funny. In a comic from the 60s, 70s, or even 80s, if we were talking Captain America comics, this kind of action sequence would have Sam or Bucky talking out loud the entire time, generally saying what they're doing, how they're fighting these bad guys. In the 90s, that external dialogue would have moved inside, and we would have seen some internal narration about what our heroes are doing or why they are doing it in order to give us greater insight into the characters and their headspace. But now, in the post-2000s, we just fight, we get a 2-page spread, and then we move on. You could set a whole movie on 8 train cars of assassins, and I am very excited for the movie Bullet Train. I'm looking forward to that. But somehow, author Derek Landy and artist Vincentini make this fight scene boring as hell. In a comic that is half action sequence, which is advertised on the flippin' cover, that's the only thing it says, fighting on a train, 8 train cars of people trying to kill the Falcon and Winter Soldier, that is a real letdown. So they reach Zemo and discover that it's Zemo. Now, the Baron was believed dead, killed over in a Punisher comic book, but he explains that he wasn't. The Punisher did shoot his hand off, but he's gonna get a robot hand put on, so that's cool, and his death was faked so that he could come back later. Specifically, right now. Bucky and Sam are disappointed at this discovery, but it works out for them. Zemo is willing to play ball. You see, he had a mole inside of the OFU, That mole had been suggesting the best and brightest future terrorists to him, which he would then recruit into HYDRA. When the Natural killed the OFU, he also shut off Zemo's best recruitment office. So, in exchange for being let go, Zemo will give them the Natural's home address. Thank you very much, guys. Hope you like the deal. Bucky is quite reluctant to accept this. He just wants to kill Zemo here. They can find the Natural again later and then deal with the new HYDRA hopeful head then, but they can end the threat of Zemo now. Sam, of course, argues against the killing, and so does Zemo. The Baron threatens to release Bucky's work with the OFU to the public if he is killed or arrested here. Think of how the American people would like the idea of a former Captain America assassinating American citizens, just for thinking differently. Why, he might up in whatever cell they had prepared for Zemo. Bucky isn't happy about it, but he and Sam take the deal. This bit of story is okay. I particularly fell in love with Baron Zemo as a character back during Volume 1 of Thunderbolts, where he was written amazingly well by author Kurt Busiek and then author Fabian Nicieza. Their version of Zemo was power-hungry, arrogant, capable of being cruel, yes, but also highly motivated. Their version of Zemo ultimately wanted power and respect, whatever it took to get it, and throughout that run of Thunderbolts, Zemo would fluctuate between doing things that looked bad but ended up being good guy deeds, and things that looked good but were actually bad guy deeds. At any moment in those stories, Zemo was a character who could save the world or damn it. And never once did it feel forced or out of character or anything like that. It's amazing writing. It's so good. But since those two authors have stopped writing Zemo, the character has fallen back to being just a bad guy, with little to no depth at all. At this point in time, Zemo had taken over HYDRA during Nick Spencer's run on Steve Rogers' Captain America and Sam Wilson Captain America, and honestly, it's one of the most boring roles that I've ever seen Zemo cast in. HYDRA is a bad guy group that does bad guy things, usually because they're either huge racists or huge fascists, or both. There is nothing honestly compelling about HYDRA, and putting Zemo in charge of them lowers him to their level from a storytelling aspect. Gone is the proud, aristocratic man of honor that, as a fan, I had such respect for, replaced by yet another cowardly, fascist a-hole. The Red Skull might be an uninteresting character, but at least he's notable because he's got a red skull. Zemo doesn't even have a horrific disfigurement. He just wears a purple sock on his head. That's way less cool than a Red Skull. He's Red Skull light. So when I read that Zemo had died over in Punisher during this story, I kind of sighed in relief. Zemo's fall from grace as a character was over. He would be dead until someone else came along, someone who was interested in dusting him off and putting him back on his marble pedestal of, is this guy a hero or a villain, where he belonged. Unfortunately for me, that person was Derek Landy, and Zemo's pedestal was less marble and more of an empty beer keg. Don't get me wrong, this version of Zemo is manipulative, at least. I do love him using Bucky's role in the OFU against him. That's a very Zemo move. I'll give him credit for that. Using the OFU to recruit new agents is smart as well, and again, that does feel very Zemo. But Zemo has also classically been a quality over quantity guy for a while now. He only allies with people that he can manipulate and throw away, but people who can ultimately help him get what he needs. What does he need a HYDRA army for? Nothing. He literally tells Sam and Bucky that if they let him go now, then sure, he's going to go plot and scheme in the shadows, but they can show up and beat him later like they always do. Zemo would not admit defeat. Zemo would not welcome it. Zemo wouldn't invite it to his door like he does here. Landy is writing Zemo like he's Cobra Commander or something. And actually, now that I say that out loud, yeah, that vibe kind of checks out. Zemo has no plot here. Zemo has no goal other than being in charge of an evil organization, and that frustrates the ever-living crap out of me. I would rather he was dead than this. Sam and Bucky swing by the Natural's home, and they're greeted by his parents, two middle-aged white folks who are decked out in Captain America-themed merchandise. They are thrilled to meet Sam and Bucky, invite them in, and spend the beginning of issue 3 gushing about how much they love Captain America, and how much merch they have. There are standees in their house, posters, lunchboxes, action figures. The wife even says that she has on the matching bra and panty set, and the husband nods, yeah, confirming that she does. Sam and Bucky question them about the Natural, who they refer to as Junior, but they say very little. And this is classically in this kind of story where you would get a big info dump on the new character. What is their real name? What was their childhood like? How did he get this ability to just murder people really well? How did he fall in with HYDRA? What are his main motivation and character traits? But no. All they say is that they love their son almost as much as they love Captain America, which, damn. And that he is real good at killing. And
no swearing.
Fuck you, Landy. Why are you being so coy about who the Natural is at this point? The first time that I read this comic, I'll admit that I gave him the benefit of the doubt. Maybe Landy is being vague here so that he can do some kind of big reveal later on in the miniseries. That was possible, but it didn't happen. The Natural starts this series as a flippant, vapid, almost joke of a character, and he stays that way throughout. We never get a real name or a motivation that feels like anything more than a joke on his part, or any kind of explanation for how someone who worships Captain America falls in with a group like HYDRA. There is no depth of character here. There is nothing more interesting going on. It feels like Landy wants to talk about how right-wing groups appropriate characters like Captain America, or real-world figures, or religious figures, just patriotism in general, for their particular vision of America. But he's trying to do so without actually talking about those groups. And I get it. It is nerve-wracking to call out 50% of the country on their behaviors, and previous Captain America authors have gotten a lot of hate for that kind of political storytelling. Nick Spencer's run on Sam Wilson Captain America and Steve Rogers Captain America got news coverage on Fox News for being too progressive and for the way that it demonized conservatives, where he had bad guy groups doing exactly the type of things that conservatives cheer for, like imprisoning illegal aliens at the southern U.S. border. As Spencer's run went on, his own commentary got more and more vague and less confident in what he was trying to say. You could see him, in a narrative sense, backing out of his own ideas, most likely in an attempt to finish his runs without being strung up publicly. Hell, I won't lie, I'm nervous as hell to talk about this issue in this episode, but either you talk about it or you don't. Either commit to the idea or don't write a comic book about it. And Landy chose to write a comic book about it. I chose to talk about it in a podcast. The lack of commitment here keeps this book from actually exploring its own ideas, and so this scene with the parents is played pretty much for laughs. Mom and Dad Natural say that they know where their son has been going lately, meaning that they know that there is a HYDRA training base in their town, and they just don't care. They don't see anything wrong with that. They didn't report it to the cops or the government or something. There's got to be a hotline for HYDRA, right? HYDRA is a known terrorist organization in the Marvel Universe, and Landy has done no work within the story in order to explain why a town in Pennsylvania would be cool with them just setting up shop in town. Just like with the Natural, there is no work done here to justify any of these story elements. What is wrong with these people? Ma and Pa Natural say that they'll tell Sam and Bucky where the base is, but with two caveats. One, they need to leave their guns here in their gun safe, because they don't want their kid to die, which, good for them. And number two, they need to change their clothes. If they think they're going to get through to their son, they're not going to do it dressed in street clothes. Sam and Bucky change into oft-brand versions of their Captain America costumes and head to the location. They sneak in, they find the Natural, he fanboys about their Captain America costumes, and they ask him why is he doing this? The Natural argues that HYDRA's changing, they're going to do some real good work. Once they've killed Zemo and their new leader is established, Hydra is going to be all new and totally improved. You're going to see, man. And I want to interrupt here to say that is some grade A buzzwords bullshit.
No swearing.
Like the rest of Landy's writing, there has been no story work done to back up that concept. There's no argument about how Hydra is going to change, or what they are going to accomplish, or how Zemo has been the one standing in the way of that change. Why is the Natural joined Hydra? Because they're changing for the better. Well, okay, how are they changing for the better? Well, they're getting a new leader. Well, what does that new leader hope to accomplish?
Still swearing.
If I know, Landy refuses to tell us. But in an attempt to show how awesome the new Hydra is, the Natural pulls a shield out of his backpack. Yo, check this out. They made him a shield. That is how supportive they are of his Captain America dreams. They gave him a shield, guys. It's not, it's not like Cap's, but it is bulletproof. Here, he hands it to Bucky. You can try it out. And they're both like, what do you mean, try it out? What are you talking about? And the Natural backs into a nearby room and the door shuts. The two of them came to a Hydra training base. Did they think that they weren't going to be attacked by Hydra goons? After ducking into the room, Hydra goons flood the hallway. They all fight. Sam and Bucky toss the shield back and forth, bouncing it off of walls and Hydra goons. We also have a running gag of Sam asking about Sally Mackenzie during the fight, so if you thought that plot point was forgotten, like I did, it actually wasn't. Once they win the fight, the Natural returns, dressed in his own Captain America costume. It draws inspiration a bit more from Bucky's design in my mind with the downward pointed shield motif, but whatever, it's a Captain America suit. The Natural is totally impressed by their work. He doesn't even recognize some of the moves that they did. It's no wonder Cap gave them the shield. That is so cool. One of the Hydra goons moans in pain, and our Caps, both having had broken jaws before, feel bad for this guy. They gather him up, and they take him to an infirmary. While they do that, they try to talk to the Natural again to examine his fascination with Cap. Like, how is it that you can worship Captain America and still murder an office full of people, kid? The Natural stops and looks Sam dead in the eyes. Quote, "The greatest villains in the world don't have superpowers or advanced tech, Mr. Wilson. They wear ugly ties and watch TV talent shows, and they wrap you up in red tape and bureaucracy." End quote. Finally, some
Still swearing.
motivation. And this I get. I think we all do if you're an American. Especially for me, as of July 2022, I'm definitely looking at the state governments of America and the Supreme Court, and I'm definitely looking at them as bad guys right now. Some of the actions that have been taken lately are huge step backwards socially, and as a human being, yeah, I want simpler answers. We all do. The people who voted President 45 into office, they wanted simple answers too. They wanted to put someone in charge who wasn't, quote, part of the political machine, end quote, who could get into office and cut through that red tape and make the changes that they wanted to have happen. And I understand that. But the problem with America is that it is a big place with wildly different cultures from state to state, and honestly even city to city. No one person can speak for all of us and still have a majority consensus. There is always going to be a disagreement, and from disagreement, we need to reach compromise. We can't have a president who gets into office and just does whatever the hell he wants, Republican or Democrat, because the American system wasn't built to support that. Ultimately, our government is complicated because we are complicated as a nation. What the Natural is saying here is that HYDRA is going to make change by removing elected officials from office by force. He is advocating, HYDRA is advocating, for domestic terrorism. This unnerves Sam and Bucky. The Natural is clearly being manipulated in their minds. He has to be. You can't worship Captain America and then be cool with destroying the democratic process. Sam tells the Natural that he's being led down a dark path, and he responds, "You mean like Mr. Barnes?" "Yes," Bucky adds. "There you go. You can still come back, though, kid. You can make this right," he argues. And this sounds good to the Natural. Anything that wins him their approval, honestly. You know, he knows about a HYDRA base in Nevada. He can take them there. He thinks maybe he has to, like maybe he was meant to do that. The Caps are cool with that idea, but first, they need to know what the kid did to Veronica Eden. And here, the Natural is confused. What do you mean? I didn't do anything with her, he says. No, you kidnapped her, Sam replies. The Natural shakes his head. No, he didn't kidnap her. This was all her idea. She's the one who's going to be the new HYDRA Supreme. In a hidden base, watching this play out on a monitor, Veronica stops stirring her coffee. She's dressed in a combat uniform, part cloth and part armor. Painted right on the chest plate is the HYDRA logo, and painted-on tentacles wrap around her midriff. Well, she says, crap. As issue 4 opens, Veronica calls her mom. She's trying to get ahead of any bad press that her family might be hearing soon about her. You see, when Veronica worked for the OFU, she was Zemo's mole, siphoning off the best for him, which is what gave her the idea to do the same. She is the one who actually recruited the most promising recruits, and then she sent the rest to Zemo, building her own sect of highly trained, really loyal HYDRA agents. And she's probably going to be fighting some Captain America soon, and there will probably be some bad press about it, but she's trying to do right here, and she loves her parents. Her mom seems cool with it. When they go to hang up, we see Veronica chuckle and reply, Yeah, Mom, hail HYDRA to you too. Her men finish preparing for their latest mission, strapping on their jetpacks and grabbing their laser guns. The Falcon and the Winter Soldier are coming with the Natural, she says. And they're not just going to wait for them to get here. She orders them to launch. Our boys, meanwhile, are being transported by cargo plane to Nevada. As they're talking, the Natural starts to gush about Captain America, about how invincible he is, how he has right on his side, and he doesn't even mean like God. Captain America he was destined to be a hero, and they are destined to do this. Anyone who gets in their way is the enemy, and the enemy must be destroyed. Landy is once again bringing up the idea of radicalization, but this time he does it for real. There's no arguing that the Natural's desire is to do good. He wants to live up to the majesty of Captain America, and that's being used against him by the very country that he wants to defend. His enemies aren't bad guys because they're doing something wrong. They're bad guys because from his perspective, he is a good guy, regardless of his actions. I like this. This is a type of character that I haven't seen in a Captain America story before. I do wish that there was more story meat on that story bone. Sam and Bucky remind the Natural that Steve Rogers' parents were Irish immigrants, and that the super soldier formula was actually developed by a Jewish man from Germany. Steve isn't any form of pure American. No one is. Even the concept of Captain America is an amalgam of ideas across cultures that all come together. This idea that the Natural has, that Cap is somehow pure America, isn't real. It's the ability of many people coming together as one that makes America great, they argue. The Natural pouts, complaining that they sound like a documentary. It's a weak comeback, but it demonstrates that the Natural isn't listening to Sam and Bucky. He's heard this before. He has watched the newsreels and the documentaries about Cap. The problem is that he doesn't care. He likes the myth more. The back of the plane opens as it approaches the Nevada HYDRA base. Falcon has wings, so he's going to go meet them down on the ground while they put their parachutes on, and why they don't have parachutes on, I don't understand, but it was done so that we can have this upcoming action sequence. Because before they can prepare at all, HYDRA jetpack agents fly in and open fire. Our heroes take the fight outside, and we get a big aerial battle that eats up several pages of the comic. Bucky and the Natural move from Hydragoon to Hydragoon, trying to slow their fall or steal a jetpack, and it keeps going wrong. It's back and forth for a bit, but they do make it to the ground safely. They scan the area, needing transport to this base, and they find a black SUV parked nearby with a HYDRA agent holding up a paper sign for them, for the Falcon and Winter Soldier. I'm not gonna lie, this is actually kind of cute. They're delivered to a roadside diner where they meet Veronica Eden. The diner is populated by people, but Veronica assures them that these people are not HYDRA agents. They're just normal people eating their breakfast. This isn't some kind of trap. So they all talk. Veronica explains that she is the one who ordered the hit on Bucky in order to cover up the OFU massacre. She knew that he would investigate the office eventually. However, she did not order the massacre, by the way. That was all the Natural. He killed them because he was bored, which the Natural did say before and reconfirms like it's some kind of big reveal in this issue. I'm not exactly sure why it's treated that way. But you know, that's this kid's great driving motivation for killing people. Because he felt like it. And that's a
Still swearing.
fucking weak-ass
Still swearing.
motivation. He adds that everyone just kept telling him that he would make a great killer, and he just wanted to see if they were right. And you know, they were. Veronica smiles. Get him, kid. And this time, no mercy. And she sicks him on Sam and Bucky. So who the fuck
Still swearing.
kept telling the Natural that he would be good at killing? When we meet his parents, they say that he is great at killing people. Quote, that boy could shoot the wings off a fly, end quote, is what they specifically say. So, were his parents, like, raising him and he started torturing flies or something, and they were like, you know what? This boy could probably kill the hell out of people. Maybe we should send him to the local HYDRA YMCA. Does that sound like a good idea to you, dear? Why, it sure does, honey. Like, what, is that what happened? If this guy is such a fan of Captain America, why didn't the Natural join the army? Why do I have to ask these questions? We had a perfectly good moment to explore the Natural's background. Instead of doing that, we got jokes and bull.
Still swearing.
And it just sounds so insane that his parents would notice an aptitude for murder and just not care. It would be one thing if he was good at killing people and somehow he kept it from his parents, or they did notice that, but then they lied to themselves about it because they didn't want to believe that he would actually hurt people. Oh, we know that he's a little weird, but he would never actually hurt anyone. That I could see. We've seen that in America before. Every time a kid has committed suicide or attacked his school, the backup thing is always no one thought that they'd be able to do it. Like, they were a weirdo, but no one thought that they would ever do anything wrong. I could see that happening. But this book was published in the year 2020 when we had 614 mass shootings in America. How could these parents not be concerned about their son who has an aptitude for killing people? It almost feels like Landy wants to say that HYDRA was the one encouraging this skill, hence him saying everyone in that scene and not specifically my parents. But Landy did establish that his parents knew about it. This is a shared burden between the parents and HYDRA, and it just feels so stupid. Or underdeveloped, like any other good idea that this book wanted to explore but didn't. Issue 4 opens with the Natural fighting Sam and Bucky. As they fight, the kid says that their words really got to him, like it really got him thinking. He wants to be worthy of Captain America, right? But how can he do that if he's also part of HYDRA? So maybe first he's going to kill them, meaning Sam and Bucky, so that they can't stop him anymore. And then he's going to kill all of HYDRA. As those three are fight-talking, Veronica excuses herself and finds Baron Zemo waiting outside the diner, surrounded by his own squad of HYDRA agents. And from there, we get ever-shifting chaos. Veronica shouts out Order 66, which is, yes, a Star Wars reference, and the HYDRA agents loyal to her shoot those agents loyal to Zemo. She tries to beat him to death with the table leg, but we actually remembered that Zemo is a practiced, skilled fighter with a new robot hand. He disarms her and grabs her by the throat, fully intending to be the only HYDRA Supreme in a moment. This is when the fighting inside the diner bursts through the window. And everyone stops. They're all shocked. They're all a little tired, maybe a little bit confused. The HYDRA goons are kind of just waiting to see who wins the HYDRA commander fight before they pick the winning side, so they're just kind of standing there with their guns drawn, but they're not doing anything. The Falcon suggests to all of the characters that have names that they team up against the HYDRA goons. That way it's just them, you know? And they do. Veronica, Zemo, the Natural, the Falcon, and the Winter Soldier dismantle the crowd of HYDRA guys with ease. They look around at each other, unsure of what to do now, and Zemo makes a suggestion. The real wild card here is the Natural. So perhaps they should just take him down next. No offense, kid. The Natural smiles. Oh no, he is a threat. He actually appreciates that level of respect. And then all 4 adults in this story beat the
Still swearing.
shit out of the Natural. I can't believe that happened. Zemo and Veronica stare down Sam and Bucky once they're the last one standing. So, now what? Well, Bucky is back on his murder shtick. If they kill Zemo and Veronica now, they effectively remove the 2 most likely people to take over HYDRA. With them dead, the authorities could sweep in, clean up HYDRA for good this time, and end their threat forever. Sure, the Falcon says, you just slip into the Winter Soldier mindset for one last time, huh? Put that kind of training to good use? Sam believes that Bucky's wet work for the OFU has caused a backslide in his morality. That's why he has been so touchy throughout this comic whenever Sam tried to talk to him about it. The government forced Bucky to become a killer again. It seems to be the only thing of value about him, and so he is beginning to embrace that mindset. But Sam says that he can't. Bucky is a hero. He can choose to be a hero. Grumbling about how much Sam bothers him, Bucky lowers his gun. He won't shoot them. So Veronica draws her pistol instead. She is ready to kill them all, but then she gets shot in the shoulder by a rando HYDRA agent. It is revealed that this is Sally Mackenzie, and Sam's speech didn't just affect the Winter Soldier. It also affected her. She starts to cry, and Sam hugs her, but Bucky is so busy with Veronica that Zemo has a chance to escape with one of the jetpacks. The Natural ends up getting arrested. Veronica ends up getting arrested. We end at one of Sam's veteran support groups, where we see Sally back with the group, and they've got a newcomer, Bucky. And that's where we end. Sally, a former soldier looking for meaning in her life, was recruited by a terrorist cell promising change and heroism. A concept that we see in Bucky during this comic, and, to some degree, the Natural. Out of our entire cast, they are the 3 who have actively killed people in the name of doing good. But this time around, we couldn't save the Natural. They did save Bucky, and they did save Sally, and honestly, that's good work. It's hard work, and it's going to continue to be hard work, but it's good work for now. Obviously, I have some problems with Landy's themes and storytelling, and I'm going to add in one more kind of complaint to the story: the tone of the book. For a book that is dealing with domestic terrorism and the radicalization of white youth through patriotism and the morality of whether murder is ever justified or not in a combat situation, this book sure tries to be an action comedy. We aren't getting the darker noir-esque, relatively real sense of drama that Ed Brubaker's Cap stories had. Nor are we getting the action-heavy, fast-paced adventure of a book like Six Guns either. Six Guns did have comedy. It had the jokes. The character of Matt Slade was pretty much all comedic relief. But everybody in that story took themselves seriously. They all acted like their decisions had consequences and impact on their lives. And that's just not a part of this story at all. Everyone is flippant. Everyone feels very relaxed, and it feels like no one takes anything in this story seriously. Sometimes that comes through in the fight scenes as we watch Sam and Bucky tear through dozens of dudes without breaking a sweat or facing any real sense of danger. Sometimes that comes in through dialogue. Like during the hallway fight in the HYDRA base, Sam is shouting for Sally, hoping to find her. And one of the HYDRA goons is suddenly like, "Oh, I know that person, stop punching me." And they stop in order to go, "Oh, you know her? Well, what's her name? What was I just shouting?" And the guy pauses. It's that name you just said?" And Sam glares at him. "You don't know who I'm talking about at all." The HYDRA goon sighs and says no, and then Sam knocks him out. Funny, right? I won't lie, the comedy angle works for characters like Veronica or the Natural in this. They're our main bad guys for this story, we're supposed to dislike them, and having them joke around makes them feel like they don't really care about what's happening around them. For example, when the Natural is discussing morality in the infirmary with Sam and Bucky, they ask for some anesthesia for the broken jaw guy. The Natural says that he's got it, and he picks up a silver medical tray, which he slams into the HYDRA guy's head. And that works for the Natural. Landy is demonstrating that the Natural does not care for his fellow HYDRA agents at all. The kid's a sociopath. But neither Sam or Bucky say anything about it when it happens. They don't protest injuring the guy further, and that just doesn't make any sense to me. They feel bad enough about this guy to take him to the infirmary, but not bad enough in order to protest the Natural's brutality? That's just totally uneven character work, and it undermines their mercy. In a story like this, the Natural should be the flippant, disconnected sociopath. He's the immediate physical threat to everyone around him, swayed by whatever argument lets him kill the most people. If he's going to be silly and murderous, then Veronica is the one who needs to be charming and alluring. She needs to be a people person, able to manipulate everyone around her. She does have a good funny streak that I like, a very sarcastic bit of meanness, but she needs to be the brains since she's the one doing the thinking for the Natural. Bucky then needs to be our grim, dark advocate for murder. He should be withdrawn, quiet, and eager to finish everything with a quick, cold brutality. Sam, finally, is then our heart. He is the moral one of the cast, who needs to remind Bucky of what it means to be a hero in order to contrast the Natural's descent into villainy. Zemo, to be quite honest, doesn't need to be here. If Landy had cut Zemo out at issue 2 and had the rest of the story be about how the radicalization of the Natural made him a threat even to HYDRA, demonstrating how radicalization is bad to either side in a conflict, and Veronica would then have needed to team up with Sam and Bucky in order to stop him, and that could have worked so much better from a storytelling perspective. It's just cleaner. But instead, everyone's a jokester comedian, and nothing is taken seriously, and it just frustrates me. A solid drama needs some comedy, yes, in order to keep things from getting depressing, but not this much. I did enjoy the background idea that Bucky has become cool with killing bad guys thanks to his work for the government. After all, Bucky started his Marvel life, honestly, as a child soldier in World War II. He isn't a stranger to killing enemies. But his time as the Winter Soldier haunts him even now and shows the danger of what happens when you're nothing but a killing machine. You kill everyone and anyone. If you're pointed in the wrong direction, you can end up helping the bad guys. This concept is echoed in The Natural, just without the brainwashing that Bucky got to become the Winter Soldier. Where Bucky listens to Sam and is reminded that just because he is skilled at killing, he is trained to do it, that doesn't mean that he has to do it. The Natural doesn't listen. That's some solid storytelling, and I really do like that idea. I just wish that we had more background on the Natural so we could actually invest in him as a character and hope that he gets redeemed. I also think there's something fascinating about the US government making Bucky an assassin again. This book almost explores the idea of how do you deal with an unjust government. For example, Veronica and the Natural want to fix America by overthrowing the government. And if the American government is using Bucky in the same manner that the Red Skull used him, in order to eliminate their enemies, then how are they any better than the Red Skull? They're still forcing him to kill people against his will, blackmailing him into these actions. But the OFU is completely killed in this story, so it's not like Bucky has to worry about that detail anymore, and it wasn't ever a facet of Bucky's life previously, so it probably won't be a thing moving forward outside of this miniseries. Plus, Landy doesn't put forward any idea of how to positively change the government without also tearing it down. Sam and Bucky just defend the establishment and don't address any of the problems with it in the story. To be fair, Landy doesn't actually bring up any examples of why the government is bad, probably so that the audience can think that the story is written for them. If you are a progressive, then whatever the government does that is conservative is evil. And if you are conservative, then whatever the government does that is progressive is evil. Landy doesn't have to pick a side in this narrative because our natural biases are going to fill in that blank for us. I would also like to note that Bucky says that his work with the OFU was a condition of his pardon for, quote, his work for HYDRA, end quote. But in the comics, Bucky never worked for HYDRA. As the Winter Soldier, Bucky had been captured by the Soviets back during World War II, he was brainwashed and then rented out to the highest bidder until 2005's Captain America run by Ed Brubaker, which saw the Red Skull get his hands on Bucky, and eventually the story led to his release. But the Red Skull was not leading HYDRA then, if I remember correctly. He was acting as an independent operator. In the comics, Bucky has never worked for HYDRA. But in the MCU, Bucky did. I understand that this comic was at least partially released because of the Falcon and Winter Soldier show on Disney+. And that's fine, but it almost feels like Landy was writing this comic using the background from the MCU and not the comics. And its tone does feel more in line with the Disney Plus show than anything else that I've read with Bucky Cap or Sam Cap in it. So, I mean, good for Landy for capturing the feel of the show, but for shame on Landy for not committing to his story or committing to the actual comic book Marvel Universe. As under-executed as I found most of the ideas in this comic to be, I have to say the artwork is very nice. Federico Vincentini does the digital line work for this comic, while Matt Milla handles the coloring. Vincentini's artwork is sharp and kinetic. It really does match the bright, action-focused style of the writing. The fight sequences play out like an action movie, like when Bucky's home comes under attack in the beginning of issue 1. That feels like the scene in Captain America Civil War where the UN task force that is hunting after Bucky for the death of T'Chaka, the one scene where Steve meets him for the first time. That is how well shot and laid out the fight sequence is. I really like that. Milla also adds a blur effect to particularly fast scenes, enhancing the speed, which is a nice touch. I do feel like there isn't anything special about the artwork, though. I've been reading Tom Taylor and Bruno Redondo's Nightwing over at DC, and Redondo's page layouts and action scenes are chef's kiss level good. They're inventive, they play with the medium of the comic book so well while still making the story enjoyable. They make even a chase scene feel unique and special, where the scenes here in this comic, they just work. I mentioned before that there's nothing notable in the fight scenes to make them stand out, but I have to give them credit that they do work, they're serviceable. I do have to give Vincentini that. I would also like to add that the covers are done by Dan Mora, who is an amazing artist in his own right. Mora got lifted into the comic book spotlight thanks to his work on Boom Studios' Power Ranger comics, if I remember correctly, but I'm most familiar with his work on the title Once and Future, a King Arthur-inspired fantasy action comic with author Kieran Gillen. His covers match pretty well with Vincentini's artwork. They're both very pointy, both very kinetic and animated, so nicely done on that pairing. Believe me, dear listener, when I say that I hadn't planned to talk about this comic on the show when I first read it, but Landy's attempts to explore modern American politics just stuck in my craw. I applaud the attempt to comment on them, given how toxic political discussion can be in America, and given that no one tried to lynch Landy like they wanted to do to Nick Spencer, then I would argue that he must have walked that line well. However, I also don't think that Landy really added anything to the discussion with this comic. The Natural is not a terribly interesting character. He doesn't even feel like a person in the comic. He's more of a living idea, and he's not a particularly compelling one at that. What he represents is terrifying, sure, but Landy does no work exploring his background, what forces shaped his life, or explaining why he does what he does. As a character, I find the Natural very lacking. Sam and Bucky, on the other hand, feel out of character for their comic book counterparts. Baron Zemo got absolutely neutered as a character in order to make Veronica seem like more of a compelling villain, and then the book just kind of ends all of their stories. There are some interesting ideas to explore here, and I do want to give Landy props for setting those ideas up. The story connections between Sally Mackenzie, Bucky, and the Natural are great, but largely unexplored in my opinion. I would actually love to see someone else pick up the Natural and try to do something more with him. I'd love to see the same with Veronica, as there is kind of a lack of true villainy to her while still having villainous goals. She doesn't really feel like a villain in the comic, she just feels like a person, and that shows some great potential to me for further usage. But overall, I would argue that this book lacks depth, it fails to say anything about the issues that it wants to comment on, and it has little to no impact on either of our title characters. It's a decent read, it's fast-paced, with comedy elements and some action scenes, and it does look good, but it's ultimately nothing amazing at the end of the day, and I'm left more frustrated than I am entertained. Next time, we're switching up the tone and the focus of Breakdown to a subject that I have never broached before. A licensed comic book. Everything that we've talked about the show so far has been owned by the publisher, but for this new streak of episodes, I'm going to be examining Dreamwave Productions' Transformers, specifically their first miniseries. Given that this is the first time that Dreamwave has gotten a focus on the show, I'll be breaking down their history for y'all, how I found this comic, and then we're going to talk about the special preview issue that was released in order to build up hype for the Transformers' return to the pages of comic books. Join me in a week for episode 21.1 of Comic Book Breakdown, Dreamwave Productions, and the Transformers. Everyone, there are a million podcasts vying for your time and attention, and I'd like to thank you for listening to mine. If you would like to get in touch with me, to share a concern, request a series, compliment me, berate me, whatever you like, send me an email at cbbreakdown@gmail.com. Otherwise, thanks for listening.